Israel is heading for the polls. Again, one might say it's the fifth general election in just 4 years, and the ballot looks fairly familiar too. Former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is looking to replace current Premier Yair Lapid. The challenger leads in the polls, but might have to rely on the far right to propel him to victory.
The seasons may change, but the question for Israeli voters remains the same. Divisive former Prime Minister Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu is vying for a return to power, campaigning across the country in his now infamous bulletproof Bibi bus.
This time, no one stays home. Everyone should go and vote Likud.
His main opponent, Yair Lapid, Israel's current caretaker prime minister and head of the centrist Yesh Atid party. Lapid took over as prime minister after his 8-party coalition government collapsed in June.
In this election, there's one thing we need to know about, that it's close. You watch TV like I do, but we know how to turn around a tight election.
Tight elections are déjà vu for Israelis who have voted 4 times in as many years.
Likud will win. They will have 34 seats and the right will win big time. It's a boring campaign. No one will deliver what we need.
All my life, I voted for Bibi. But now, with all his trials, I don't want him to run the country.
To form a coalition government, candidates need 61 out of 120 Knesset seats. Final polls predict Netanyahu and his aligned right-wing religious parties at 60 seats, just 1 seat short of a majority. Lapid's bloc is lagging slightly behind, but nothing is certain yet.
I think that these elections are about liberalism versus nationalism, the big ideas personified in 2 people, liberalism in Lapid and his kind of camp, nationalism personified in Netanyahu and his very clear camp.
It's also about this man, Itamar Ben-Gvir, from the far-right alliance Religious Zionism. They're currently polling 3rd. If they do that well, it could make this once fringe figure the kingmaker for a Netanyahu-led coalition.
I see Netanyahu actually embracing him, and with Netanyahu, the entire Likud MKs keep on saying, what's the problem with Itamar Ben-Gvir? You know, why shouldn't we embrace him? So, I mean, it's like riding the tiger, right? On the back of the tiger, you know, the tiger is now more powerful than the rest of them.
Netanyahu, who is facing corruption charges in court, has just published his memoir. Soon he will know whether he will be the one to write the next chapter in Israeli politics.
And our correspondent Tanya Kremer filed that report and has, of course, much more to tell us. Tanya, Israelis face a familiar choice, and Netanyahu is again at the center of it all. How heavy do the corruption charges weigh over him and his campaign?
Well, I think you just said it. I mean, for many Israelis here, it feels like it's another kind of referendum on the former long-term Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He's now the opposition leader, and he wants to return to power again. Now, he can do so. I mean, nothing in Israeli legislation prevents him from running again as the head of the Likud. Although he is facing corruption charges, he has to fight for his innocence in court. Now, we should not forget, he has still a very large base. Likud, his party, is usually the largest party. It also is predicted in the polls up to the election now as, again, the largest party. And, you know, I talked to some of his supporters also now on the campaign trail. They always say, Rak Bibi, that means only Bibi, and only he can actually provide the safety, the security for Israel's citizens. That's their take. But of course, it runs it runs along political lines here. You have those who are supporting him and who want him to return to power, and those who say no, because just he is sitting in court, basically. He cannot run the country again, and those who are really horrified for him to return. Now, if you're looking at the last polls, the final polls that were published on Friday by the three main television channels here, we've been seeing that it's a very, very tight race. The Likud and Mr. Netanyahu, with his Likud and his religious right-wing bloc, they would reach 60 seats. You need 61 seats out of 120 seats in the Knesset. So this is a very, very tight race, as we see. But on the other hand, it could also be just once more an inconclusive election, and we could see another election in sometime soon.
Let's talk about the potential kingmakers here. How do people feel about Likud's alliance with the far-right religious Zionism party?
Well, I think that has been, here in the headlines for the whole election campaign, the rise of the far right. We're talking here about the Alliance Religious Zionism. This is an alliance of three parties. And one of the leaders, number 2, actually, on the list, we saw it in the report, Itamar Ben-Gvir, has become a bit the poster boy in this election campaign. He's all over the place, you could say. He's on TV channels, he's giving a lot of interviews, and it is a very strange way to see how the far right and the extremist views, especially from Itamar Ben-Gvir, who used to be known as a supporter of the late Rabbi Meir Kahane, who was an extremist leader. He was assassinated in 1990. He was the head of the Kach party. That was a party that was outlawed as a terror organization in the US and in Israel. And Mr. Itamar Ben-Gvir also has been indicted several times for incitement. So it is a very strange campaign to see him coming up so high in the polls, which this alliance could be the third largest party. And as we heard in the report, they could be potentially the kingmakers in a Netanyahu-led coalition if he can build a coalition, and they could becoming rather influential in some of the ministries.
Yeah. One key demographic, though, to stop a Netanyahu victory could be Arab Israelis, but it seems like they're somewhat reluctant to vote. Explain to us why that is.
Well, I think we have to wait and see. There has been a lot of focus on the turnout, the voter turnout in the Arab community, a minority here, about 20% of Israel's population. But I think it's still too early to tell, because there have been, the polls give not a clear picture at the moment. There have been polls that are going lower than 40% turnout and up to 50%. That's the latest polls I've been seeing in the voter turnout. That is important for the party blocs, because a lower voter turnout in the Arab community could mean that it would benefit Mr. Netanyahu and his right-wing religious bloc. A higher turnout could benefit Mr. Lapid, the current prime minister of the caretaker government. And if you talk to people from the community, they have reasons not going to vote, but there are also those who will go to vote. So I think, we still have to wait to see what the voter turnout is. But some would say, that we don't feel that we are really seen. What impact do we have, especially if you see right now there has been an Arab party in the government, in the last government, the 8-party coalition government, and still, we're seeing at the same time now the rise of the far right.
Tanya Kramer in Jerusalem, thank you so much.